Hello, everyone. My name is Victor. I am the occult technician, and this is Mind War, Episode 5. Welcome back, everyone. To pick up where we left off, we are working from a book titled Mind War by Dr. Michael Aguino. Mind War was written as a global strategy for peace. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aguino was tasked with writing Mind War as a way to reevaluate psychological operations in the United States Army after the Vietnam War. We are taking the global tactics found in Mind War and we are applying those tactics to our personal lives, right? We're doing that in order to overcome some of the difficulties and the challenges we face in our life. And we're doing this as a way to take traditional therapy, traditional self-help, and just add a little flair to it. Take it out of the mundane, take it out of the boring, take it out of the institutional kind of healthcare setting, and do it in a way that maybe will grab your attention and my attention and just give us an overall better understanding of what we need to do to make major changes in our lives, changes that are for the better, things that will make us healthier, happier, more resilient in our life, right? So we're going to pick up where we left off. We're on page 77 in a section titled PSYOP, Un-American but Necessary. What does all this have to do with PSYOP? To be effective in this art, the Psi operator must venture beyond the Lockean universe, and he cannot allow his assessments of competitive universes to be distorted by Lockean faith-based values. If he condemns a compelling ideological universe, such as Marxism, a priori, simply because it is a competitor, he has safeguarded his orthodoxy within the American military culture. But he also lost the ear of non-Americans who do not look at socio, political, and economic realities through the Locke-tinted glasses. To be effective and credible, a PSYOP challenge to Marxism must evaluate it rationally and then propose a rational alternative to it, which is conceptually and demonstrably superior. To respond only with an indignant denunciation, else is merely to indulge oneself in the equivalent of emotional name-calling, which may be satisfying and reassuring, but does not adjust matters towards the solution of an international or intercultural impasse. So what we're saying here, folks, is remember not to get too caught up in safeguarding the traditional orthodoxy that you're stuck in. That's the thing that we're trying to leave, right? That's the thing that we're trying to change and adjust. Don't get too comfortable safeguarding that orthodoxy, because you may just find yourself mired in the same problems that you're facing now, right? You have to be open-minded. Don't forget that. We're going to look at things from all different angles. We might look at 100 different solutions. 99 of them might not work for our situation, right? Remember, what is the goal of Mind War in our personal lives? It is to achieve what is called the Aristos, the best possible scenario for our given situation, okay? We may not be able to change the situation that we are currently in, but we can adjust the battlefield to ensure that it is the best possible scenario. Once we've done that, we can regain our strength and our purpose and our focus. Then we can work on changing our situation. Okay? By its very nature, then, PSYOP sticks in the craw of American political culture and of its conventional military establishment. to reach through the body into the mind with the intent of manipulating it, somehow held to be an unclean science, a kind of black art practiced by mad scientists, but, but not by straightforward, decent Americans. We have consoled ourselves that we do it not because we want to, but only because the other side does it, and we have to counter them. Once you allow a dog to consider it acceptable to attack human beings, for instance burglars, a threshold has been crossed which changes forever the dog-human relationship. The human can never see his dog in quite the same way once it has tasted human flesh. Presumably, the dog also sees humans, including his master, somewhat differently. Since PSYOP is conspicuously outside the norms of the American military culture, its practitioners also carry something of a taint. It would be even more of a taint if it were perceived or allowed to develop their arcane art to its potential limits, but until the advent of mind war, they were not. Like a sentry dog on a leash, PSYOP is not allowed to run wild, adjusting values, thoughts, and behavior according to unorthodox and mysterious criteria. It has been placed firmly and decisively in support of normal traditional military operations as a combat support element, a battlefield janitor, of physical war's emotional stresses, fears, and susceptibilities. So remember what we talked about earlier is one of the goals in mind war is to flip the process of what we think of as physical war. So instead of waiting till a situation gets so out of hand that the only solution is physical war, the mind war PSYOP teams would go into these areas where we see trouble brewing and stop it before it gets started, right? Doing whatever they can to figure out what the issues are and resolve them peacefully. That's the goal here, right? Let's resolve these things peacefully. And in the process, let's try to direct whatever groups are involved towards the solution that we find best for ourselves, right? Now, that may be thought of in this context as the American military or the American government, right? When they go in and do PSYOPs in other countries, they're doing it for national security reasons, reasons that are for the betterment of the United States, right? We think of it the same way in our personal lives. Instead of allowing things to get so bad that a quote unquote physical war is the only way to resolve the issues in our personal lives, we instead come up with our mind war matrix, which we talked about last week, right? The mind war matrix is basically the multi-layered or multi-legged plan. These are different action items that we can take in our lives to, again, change the scenario, make sure that the scenario that we're in is currently the best possible scenario for our given situation, right? In practice, this has severely limited the effectiveness of military PSYOP as a means to change the ideological and ethical opinions of the enemy. It renders PSYOPs useful only as a means to communicate surrender messages to opposing forces on the battlefield, or to issue controlling instructions to civilians in the area. Orthodox themes reaching beyond such simple, direct messages are quickly perceived as sloganistic, hence discounted by all but the most primitive audiences. The technique of interviewing captured or surrendering recipients at the implicit end of a gun barrel is unlikely to elicit sincere comments as to the effectiveness of such propaganda. Self-interest dictates an answer contrived to pleasing to the interrogator. The final disgrace of PSYOP came in 2010, when the Army renamed its Frankenstein monster from PSYOP to Military Information Support Operations, MISO, fooling no one, of course, except the renamers themselves. Evolution to Mind War Branch. The new Mind War Branch not only permanently retires PSYOP and MISO's role as an embarrassing battlefield janitor, but emplaces it at the very center of future Army operations. Henceforth, all Army missions begin with mind war campaigns, with physical war operations initiated only in the event of mind war's failure. And remember, like we said before, mind war must not fail. Mind War Branch functions as the controlling brain of the mind war campaign, determining, evaluating, and modifying the subject situation conditions causing the problem. During the detection, evaluation, and preparation phases of the campaign, it accomplishes this through the means outlined in sections F and G of this chapter. Once and only if sufficient subject adjustment has been accomplished, the on-site human components of the mind war campaign, first the metaphors, and then the parapolitics, are inserted. At all times following such insertion, Mind War Branch maintains its umbrella over the entire environment, further adjusting it as necessary. It does not close this umbrella until all on-site Mind War assets are removed. So remember what we said here earlier. Mind War campaign is meant for determining, evaluating, and modifying the subject situation conditions causing the problem. We talked about that in earlier episodes. Taking a truthful, honest evaluation of your current situation. There is no one that you can lie to, or you can lie to everyone else except yourself, right? That's the most important part of these evaluation practices. You have to be truthful with yourself. If you lie to yourself during this initial phase of determining what the situation you're in and what the best scenario is for that given situation, if you're lying to yourself about it, any work in the future on your mind war campaign in your personal life is going to be a failure because it started with lies. Okay? You cannot lie to yourself. You can lie to others, right? But you cannot lie to yourself. This is the most important part. This is that first step. Is realizing you need to be honest with yourself. The old PSYOP doctrine called for techniques to induce confusion, fear, and obedience in the face of U.S. physical war operations. It made liberal use of secrecy, lies, rumors, deception, and anything else to degrade and demoralize the faceless, human dignity undeserving enemy. It sought to incite alienation and, if possible, defection from the enemy of its soldiers and civilians alike, thus fragmenting the underlying political and social system. We'll stop there again real quick. Because again, remember, if your current situation is so bad that you see that it feels like a battlefield, it feels like you're in physical war, the people that are coming against you are constantly using secrecy, lies, rumors, deception, and anything else to degrade and demoralize you, right? If that's the situation you find yourself in, then the tactics that we have here in Mind War, we're going to use those tactics in order to regain control of your battlefield, the battlefield that you find yourself in right now. You're going to do an honest evaluation of what that battlefield truly is. And then you're going to start to make your plans on how to adjust and change your life. Remember, we talked about any changes that you make, do them behind the scenes first. Allow them to sink in. Make sure that these changes are something that you can maintain before you go out and propagandize those changes to your family, friends, coworkers, right? Because we've said it before and we'll say it again. Anytime you make mistakes, anytime you mess up, anytime you stumble, those who are coming against you, they will remember that and they will use that against you in the future. So let's not give them too much ammunition, right? No reason to arm your enemy. Mind War Branch has nothing to do with any of this. It never lies or selectively distorts the truth. It respects every human being as having the same worth, dignity, and right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, no matter what his or her nationality or culture. It does not disrupt existing social or cultural institutions. The enemy in Mind War is never other human beings. It is the problem which has caused such humans to destabilize their behavior dangerously or destructively. It's a very powerful chapter. We have to remember that those enemies, right, whoever they are, they still need to be treated with dignity and the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, no matter who they are. And the goal isn't necessarily to go in and try to change the culture that we're in overnight. That isn't how it works. Remember, we talked about before, if you go in guns a-blazing, right, everyone's just going to turn their focus on you. They're going to turn the hoses on you, and they're going to put out your fire. Okay? Sometimes it takes a lot longer to make a significant change in culture than we could ever imagine. There are changes to our current culture which may take the rest of our lives to see happen. But if they're needed changes, and they're correct changes, and they're righteous changes, if I can use that term, if they're worth fighting for, then that's what we're going to do. Simple, peaceful changes that will take us out of the physical war mindset this country and this world has been in for millennia. And we will move into a more peaceful nature, right? Where maybe these psyops won't be necessary. Thus, Mind War Branch, when conducting a mind war campaign, does so actively and continuously with influential humans from the subject situation, not against them. The result is a solution both understandable by and satisfactory to the native population indefinitely after the mind war campaign ceases and all U.S. assets are withdrawn. We next turn to the operational universe of Mind War Branch and the tools it uses therein. This involves the nature and functioning of human thought processes and the techniques, psi controls or psi-cons, used both separately and in combination to influence these. Section E, Thought Architecture. In order to influence and control the human mind, Mind War must first know how thoughts are inspired and constructed. This requires an identification of the two types of thought emergence, the unconscious and the conscious. Despite the fact that 95% of thinking is subconscious, most people assume that their opinions, ideas, and conclusions are all conscious decisions. Indeed, much of traditional Miso is based upon this assumption that it is the deliberately constructed ideas of an audience which are the target. This is why such campaigns are so ineffective. Okay, a lot to break down here. So again, 95% of our thinking is subconscious. Only 5% of it is conscious thinking. So, as we've talked about in my other series, where we discussed the use of the Gateway Experience tapes. Through the use of those tapes, you are consciously able to tap into your subconscious. It's a very interesting phenomenon. It's an amazing practice, and it really will help you gain a better understanding of those subconscious values that direct your life that you're not even aware of. If your subconscious is what is directing the majority of decisions in your life, it's truly amazing to be in a mindset through the use of the Gateway Experience tapes that allows you to kind of step back from yourself and look at yourself, look at your subconscious in a way that you normally can't when you're just going about your day. When you're going about your day, your subconscious is driving you, right? Things like hunger and sleep and knowing that you need to go to work and wear a certain character that you may despise, but that's what you have to do while you're at work, right? These subconscious things, smiling even though you're unhappy, right? Those types of things that are just part of our culture, what are expected of us through our society. You get a better understanding and a clear vision of how your subconscious actually is running your life. It can be a long process, right? It takes a lot of work to work through those tapes and actually gain the experience to get them to effectively work. But when you do, it's amazing, right? It really will help you transform your life. Number 1, unconscious thought. A, prevalence. When a human perceives a situation, action, and or other humans, an instant unconscious framing of the sensation occurs before there is any conscious reaction or evaluation. Indeed, it is the very immensity and habituation of this framing that makes it unnoticeable and unremarkable. Thus, the sound of gunfire in the vicinity of one's home elicits alarm, while near a military rifle range, it would not. Approaching an intersection triggers accustomed expectations of vehicular and pedestrian behavior, the sequencing of traffic lights, and the lane crosswalk pathways. As an individual encounters different surroundings with different inhabitants, instant classification of them takes place. This is sometimes called instinct or assumptions taken for granted. This picture is also assumed to be common to all who experience it, but it is in fact markedly unique to each individual. The sum total of all one's cultural indoctrination, education, experiences, prejudices, desires, and emotions serves as the lens through which it is perceived as reality. While the concept of unconscious thought extends well back into antiquity, it received its first modern appreciation from the philosopher named Immanuel Kant. 1724 to 1804. Bishop Berkeley's subjective idealism had held that nothing could be known objectively, that knowledge is limited to subjective impressions. Kant refines this into what is called critical idealism, in which human thought is subdivided into sensation, understanding, and pure reason. Sensations and understanding of them and consequences of them can be proven, Kant says, but pure reason, concepts unsupported by sensations, cannot be conclusive. It is beyond causality. It is the first two processes, sensation and the overlay of understanding upon that sensation, which result in Kant's construction of reality. Right? So we're talking about how important it is that sensations and the understanding of sensations, again, control our subconscious, right? The sensations that we feel in life, again, hunger, tired, the weather, so is it hot, is it cold out? These type of things are going to subconsciously direct us. And oftentimes, the sensations that we deal with in life, we do not understand them properly, right? So the result of that could be things like overeating, okay? So again, you're at your very stressful job. You've been there for hours. You're drinking tons of caffeine instead of eating because you are busy at work. And then as soon as you get done, all the stresses kind of melt away because you're no longer at work. And now you do not know how to really handle all these situations. So what do? You reach for the fastest food option available, fast food, right? And it's filled with all of those things that our body thinks it desires because we don't truly understand it. So things like fats and sugars and salt and all that kind of stuff, right? And all that's going to do is just perpetuate and continue to cause more trouble in our lives. And that's where that pure reason comes in. We have to become closer with pure reason, right? Why do we do this? What is the pure reason that we need to do A, B, and C? What is the reason that we have to make these changes, right? They may not fulfill the sensations that we're looking for. We may not understand the new sensations that come from eating healthier. Oh, it's so boring. Eating the same things every day. They don't taste good. They don't give me the same physical feelings that I used to. But guess what? Over time, literally like 2 weeks of healthy eating, and all of a sudden your appetite changes. And now the sensations that you have, you start to understand them in a new way. And you realize, oh, maybe that fast food wasn't as appetizing as I had thought it was. So here's kind of a personal example of that. For many years, I battled with alcoholism. One of my routines was as soon as I got out of work and got home, I enjoyed a shower beer. Many of you have heard of the shower beer. You get that ice cold beer out of the fridge and you take it right to the shower with you as you wash off the grime and filth of your workday. Right? For the longest time, that was this routine that I thought I enjoyed. This was a sensation that I didn't quite understand what it truly was. One day when I got home, after doing this repeatedly for years maybe, I didn't have any beer in the fridge. And instead of taking a beer into the shower, I just drank a huge glass of water when I first got home. And you know what I started to understand? That the sensation that I was having when I got home from work was thirst. Not a desire for alcohol or for a beer. I was simply thirsty. Amazing, right? That seems so much more reasonable, doesn't it? You spent all day working, maybe not drinking as much as you should because you were busy during work. And when you got home, I thought, hey, the beer is what I want. Well, guess what? The sensation was I just needed to hydrate. Because what was happening is as soon as I got home and had that first beer, the second, third, and additional beers just started. I usually wouldn't stop drinking until it was time to go to bed. But what I found is when I came home and drank that giant glass of water when I first got home and dealt with that thirst, I was able to go several hours before I drank a beer. Maybe I would wait till dinner. Maybe I would wait till after dinner. And my alcohol intake went from, say, 6 to 10 beers a night, maybe down to 2. Still not great, but much better. Okay? We're using pure reason to understand the sensations of our lives. We're going from a subconscious controlling our minds to a conscious control of our minds. We are taking a conscious, clear, honest look at what we do and why we do it. Take the time, folks. It can be difficult. Again, you cannot lie to yourself, but take the time. It may only be just a few minutes of sitting and contemplating about your life and what you truly are doing and why you're doing it. And maybe taking that, that difficult first step of just saying, you know what, today, I'm just going to try something different today. Instead of taking a beer into the shower, I'm going to take a glass of water. This reality contains predispositions concerning physical surrounding, such as one's like or dislike of the terrain, climate, elevation, level of development, etc. It also includes assumptions concerning the population, both individually and in mass, of which some are politically and culturally acceptable and others not. For instance, race, religion, sex, the role of the genders, slavery, economic systems, and political ideologies are all factors with extremely powerful influence, but about which open discussion is severely constrained by convention and taboo. Identifying and overcoming such taboos are a major challenge to mind warriors, not just in phase 1, but throughout the entire Mind War campaign. But it is a challenge which cannot be avoided or sanitized if the Mind War campaign is to succeed. So again, that's basically looking at the different political and cultural things that are accepted in the situation that you find yourself in, and understanding that it can be very challenging to change those things. It's going to take time. Be cautious, one step at a time. Don't burn too many bridges. Don't raise all these red flags that are going to get people all excited because you want to make all these changes in your life. Make the changes incrementally, make them behind the scenes, allow them to grow and produce fruit. Oh boy, right? And once we see that these changes are positive in our lives and they're uh, taking us in a better direction that we were, they're changing the scenario that we were in for positive, then we can start to uh, propagandize a little bit to those around us what we're doing. Again, because they're going to recognize those positive changes in your life. Some are going to be upset, some are going to be scared, right? But that's okay. You'll deal with that. And eventually, they're either going to just leave you alone and try to ignore it or whatever. But some of them may actually come along to your side and say, hey, I like what you're doing. I want to make those changes in my life also.
Three, two, one. Wake up, open your eyes.
B, pattern thinking. Unconscious, non-deliberate thought manifests itself not in articulated expressions or ideas, but in overlays or patterns into which the sensory impressions are placed and assumed to have significance. So strong are these patterns that it is pointless to think of reasoning or arguing people out of them. At most, individuals or groups can be forced or enticed to not comply with them temporarily, but as soon as the threat or bribe is removed, the reality patterns will reassert themselves. Societies frequently see such patterns articulated as traditions, norms, or other expressions of dominant values, often reduced to simplistic dogma, slogans, or ideologies. All right, folks, this is being recorded in October of 2023. So this time, about this time 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, we were all required through, let's see, what's the word that we were looking for? We were forced, or let's say enticed, to temporarily change the patterns of our lives, right? For those of you who remember the year 2020 and what was going on during that year, we were told to stay home and not go to work and not do the regular patterns in our lives. This was a dramatic change for many people. Many people found it very difficult to deal with. But what we ultimately saw is that once the threat was removed, the patterns simply reasserted themselves. Within just a few months after the lockdown orders being removed, people just went on about their lives as if it never happened. Very interesting. There's so much we can learn from that time period. So many tools that we can take, and scenarios and situations and just amazing stories that came out that teach us so much about human behavior and this, what we call pattern thinking, how people were broken of their pattern and how quickly they went right back to it. You can almost think of a line of ants, hundreds, maybe thousands of ants marching along in a straight line, all going towards a piece of food off in the distance, grabbing their little piece of food and turning around and heading right back to the nest. This was happening day after day, month after month, year after year. decades. This went on with no disturbance in the pattern. And then here you come, just nonchalantly walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden you step in their path and you destroy their pattern. And you leave behind mud that blocks their way, and now their pattern is disturbed. And you see maybe a little bit of chaos. You see the ants running around looking about what's happening, seeing the casualties, evaluating the situation, overcoming the obstacle that was put in front of them. And before you know it, they're right back in their pattern. We'll leave that analogy and go back to reality. In some ways, the events of 2020, now that we're 3 years out from it, it's like the people involved learned nothing. I look around today and people, it's like they don't even remember that it happened. They're right back into those same sensations, right? They're right back into fulfilling that same pattern thinking. It's can be frustrating for those of us who are trying to make positive changes in culture and society, who are trying to view life through new lenses, right? It can be frustrating watching people just fall right back into those same old patterns. But again, we learned a lot from that year. And we're going to take those tools and the lessons that we learned, and we'll use them as we go forward. When new events come down the pike, they always will, right? When new things disturb our pattern of thinking, right? We will be prepared because we are thinking about it before it happens. Number 2, conscious thought. Distinct from the unconscious is consciousness, which accounts for the remaining 5% of human mental activity. It is generally divided into 2 realms. A, algorithmic. Algorithmic thought, Plato's Dioneia and Hegel's dialectic idealism, is what is normally understood as logical or observable reasoning, a math problem, or the speed of a nearby car. Unlike pattern thinking, algorithmic thinking is conscious, deliberate, effort-demanding, and transitory. The moment a particular stimulation no longer demands it, an algorithmic thought retreats into increasingly vague memory. Then, if sufficiently ignored, it eventually disappears. Traditional PSYOP propaganda is so ineffective because it is algorithmic. It makes arguments for reasoned behavioral changes, not recognizing nor appreciating the dominant power of the unconscious patterns governing that behavior. So often what we find is those who are involved in psychological operations and those who are involved in so many other operations, whether it is large-scale corporations, institutions, whatever it may be, many of the people that make these things work, make these systems actually function, think algorithmically. They're using reasoning. They are adding stimulus and seeing what the results are. They're removing stimulus and seeing what the results are. And they are acting on a plane of reason. They are acting on the plane of reality, right? But it can be very difficult because the people who use the system are working and acting in a subconscious way, right? So here's an example. There are two types of people who go to, say, amusement parks like Disney, right? The majority of people who walk through the gates of Disneyland or Disney World allow themselves to be swept up in the magic of it all. They look around and it seems like a magical world. They don't understand how the things work. They allow themselves to subconsciously, through the subconscious, they allow themselves to believe that the characters that they're seeing are real, that the roller coasters that they are on are real, right? That is one group of people, the magical thinkers, the ones who are persuaded by magic. But then there are people who are the algorithmic thinkers who walk in through the Disney gates. The engineers, the electricians, the plumbers, the IT folks, right? When they walk through the gates at Disney, they don't see the magic. They see engineering, they see electrical work and plumbing work and IT. They see all the separate systems that make Disney overall function. They don't see the magic. They see the reality, and that's how they think, right? And again, the number of engineers and mathematicians and IT folks and stuff that are walking through the Disney gates are probably about 5%. Those conscious thinkers who make the systems that we depend on work, while the rest of them, the subconscious thinkers, get to enjoy the magic. B, conceptual. Conceptual thought, Kant's pure reason, Plato's gnosis, and Nietzsche's horizon building begins from the apprehension of one's conscious self as an existential reality. The bay of ancient Egypt, the psyche of the Greeks, the golden flower of the Tao, the soul of Judeo-Christianity, identifying, in the words of Dr. Reg Havan, ear, not the shadowy self or false egoity, ego, which merely reacts to external stimuli. Rather, there is the eye of wisdom in every person, which in deep sleep is fully awake and which has a translucent awareness of self-conscious as pure primordial light. That is a very poetic way to describe going beyond the shadow self, going beyond the ego. What he says here is very interesting. That there is the eye of wisdom in every person, which in deep sleep is fully awake. Again, I want to go back to the Gateway Experience tapes. In those tapes, Dr. Monroe teaches you hypnosis. The best way to describe hypnosis is that your body is fully asleep while your mind is wide awake. This is what I'm talking about, folks. A new state of being that we're not used to. When your body is fully asleep, you are not at the demands of your sensations. You're not at the demands of the senses in your body. You get a time to think clearly without feeling the pain and the tired and the hunger and the exhaustion. Those things slip away because your body is in deep sleep, but your mind is wide awake. And in that state of mind, you're able to explore your subconscious in a conscious way. You're able to actively, consciously explore your subconscious and find the true reasons why you are stuck in certain patterns. Okay? Conceptual thought then extends to ideas, envisions, and expressions radiating creatively from that affirmation. While central to the very essence of humanity and its innate value independent of all utilitarian concerns, the soul is unidentifiable to and untouchable by mind war, nor is it of mind wars concerned. It exists in metaphysics, while mind war is interested in the unconscious and algorithmic conscious analysis and control of the mind. This quality of thought is the subject of the author's companion book, Mind Star. Uh-oh, folks. Dr. Guino let it slip there that Mind War is the first in a 3-book series. The next book is called Mind Star, and the third book is called Find Far. And we may just have to, in a future series, go through those books. Mind Star is another amazing book that deals more with the cultural and societal and political situations that we find ourselves in and how to overcome them. I think it's a great companion book for this. And so we may have to look into Mind Star. F. Liminal methods. The situational participants may be contacted directly and overtly by the Mind War team, informed of the team's assigned goal, and invited to cooperate in achieving it. If this sounds like an odd, even naive way to fight a war, consider that many international conflicts are the result of misunderstanding, narrowly focused division, and emotional grandstanding. If conflicts can be objectively and comprehensively defined, and the situational condition identified as something whose resolution is advantageous and prestigious to the conflicted participants, that is the simplest and most direct path to contemplation of that mind war matrix component. So a quick example of this is if the people in your life who, again, are bringing that kind of physical war to you in your personal life, they're the ones that are demanding that you fit into this gross culture or decaying society around you, and you're simply trying to make changes. Maybe what you can do is focus on one specific situation, one specific scenario that you see that those people want to change in their lives also. One that is an area that you're also trying to change. And maybe that's the first thing that you start working on with them, something small. And once you do that, once you take on and team up with them on a small scale issue and you overcome it, now this person who at one time was your enemy is now your ally. Now they trust you. Look, you've resolved this small issue together, right? Number 1, voluntary side control. If a cooperative consensus cannot be reached, the team must identify the factors preventing it and attempt to correct or remove them. These may be simple or complex, expensive or incidental financially, and or in or out of the direct control of the target actors. If the mind ward team can resolve these by its own skill and with financial material assets accessible to it, it should continue its efforts. Number 2, involuntary psi control. If a cooperative consensus cannot be created, the mind war team proceeds to create consensus by mind war technology, involuntary psi control of the enemy actors. Involuntary psi control takes 2 forms, liminal and subliminal. So we've all heard of subliminal mind control techniques, sneaking things into movies and music and video games, that symbols that we see every day that we don't actually understand what they mean, but subliminally they are very powerful and are very controlling. So we're going to take a look at liminal and subliminal. Number 3, liminal involuntary psi control. A, the influence continuum. The primary vehicle for liminal IPC is the influence continuum, which supersedes the old black, gray, white propaganda methodology and model. A tailored influence continuum may be directed towards either the situation participants themselves or other individuals or groups who can influence those participants in the desired direction. Normally, the least forceful of the continuum stages necessary to achieve cooperative stabilization will be employed, and the liminal involuntary psi control component of the mind war campaign coordinated with the others towards the common immediate goal of the aristos. Mind war liminal psi control is effective because it first identifies the governing thought patterns, then stimulates individuals' core reality lenses to interpret them in the desired way. The next evolution of this liminal control can be electronically mapped thought patterns, which have the same impact among all humans sharing them, and to artificially generate and transmit them to target groups through electronic media. Interesting. So this liminal control is more direct. It is less hidden, right? We're working together in these liminal control ideas to achieve that aristos, the goal of the aristos. And in this situation, they are transmitting them electronically, like I said, through movies and music and video games and social media, right? Part B, liminal involuntary psi control constriction. Beyond direct liminal involuntary psi control communication, desired courses of action may further be encouraged by the removal or imitation of alternatives or limitation of alternatives. If a conflict entity is considering physical war, for instance, constriction of its financial resources and or military supplies may make this option impractical. Where possible, such choice constrictions should be done without explanation or publicity so as not to highlight them as physical war threats or actions. The sole purpose of such constrictions is to channel the conflict participants towards a mind war solution. The inverse of alternative constriction, enticements or promises of rewards for the liminal involuntary psi control cooperation, such as economic or military aid, should be avoided. Such bribery discredits this liminal control process in the eyes of both participants and onlookers, and opens the door to insincere pro forma results subject to contemptuous disregard the moment such bribes are delivered. rewards for a successful liminal control operation come about naturally and incidentally, in which case respect and appreciation for the liminal control solution will be that much stronger and more durable. So again, we're not going to bribe our way out of these situations. We're not going to bribe other people into believing that the solutions that we've come up with are what's best for them. That's a false and very limited way of trying to make change, whether it's on a personal scale or a global scale, right? Bribery is just going to lead to confusion. It's going to lead to lies and corruption, right? And ultimately, the people that you are bribing aren't going to change. So we need to use these other tactics to ensure that the solutions, the agreed upon solutions, the best scenario for all participants in the situation, right? These new scenarios, these new changes that are coming, we need to use these tools to have them come about covertly in a way, not so overtly that people lose faith in them. Pre-mind war mind control attempts. The last half of the 20th century saw numerous experiments in thought control and extrasensory perception, some sponsored by various U.S. government agencies. Their common characteristic is that they did not work. They were all attempts to control thought at its expression, not its construction. Briefly summarized. All right, folks. I think we're going to leave it there for this episode of Mind War. Don't forget to check out my Etsy page. You're going to find great hoodies, sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats, beanies, stickers. Don't forget to check out my other playlist on YouTube. Check out My Magical Year for a better understanding of the Gateway experience and the things that I've experienced through the use of those tapes, right? That's a great series. I appreciate you being here today for this episode of Mind War, episode 5. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you very much. Your friend Victor, the Occult Technician.